You were told Islam spread by the sword, but no one told you it spread by ideas. In a world drowning in ignorance, it built libraries, universities, and a civilization obsessed with knowledge. If you don't understand this revolution of the mind, you don't understand history or the world you live in today. They told you Islam spread by the sword. That's the lazy version of history. That's the version that fits into a tweet, a headline, a prejudice. But history is never that simple. Civilizations are not transformed by steel alone. They're transformed by ideas. And if you look honestly, without fear, without propaganda, without inherited bias, you'll discover something uncomfortable and extraordinary. Islam did not just create a religious movement, it ignited one of the greatest intellectual revolutions in human history. Let's ground ourselves in reality. 7th century Arabia was not Rome, it was not Persia, it was not Athens, it was largely tribal, fragmented, oral. And yet, within a century of the Prophet Muhammad's death, a civilization inspired by Islam was stretching from Spain to Central Asia. That expansion alone would be historically significant, but conquest is not the revolution. Conquest is common. What followed is what matters. What followed was an explosion of scholarship, translation, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, architecture, and law. That is not the footprint of a civilization obsessed with destruction. That is the signature of a civilization obsessed with knowledge. The first word revealed in the Quran was read. Think about that. Not fight, not conquer, not obey. Read. In a largely illiterate society, the foundation was literacy. That is revolutionary, because when you elevate knowledge to a sacred act, you change the trajectory of a people. Learning becomes worship, inquiry becomes devotion, curiosity becomes a moral duty. And once that mindset takes hold, institutions follow. In Baghdad, the Abbasid caliphs established the Bait al-Hikra, the House of Wisdom. Scholars from different backgrounds, religions, and languages gathered to translate Greek philosophy, Persian literature, Indian mathematics. This was not narrow-minded dogmatism, this was intellectual hunger. Works of Aristotle, Plato, Galen, Euclid, texts that might have been lost, were translated into Arabic, studied, critiqued, expanded upon. Let's be honest about something else. Europe at that time was not leading the intellectual world. The so-called Dark Ages were real in terms of institutional collapse in parts of Western Europe. Meanwhile, in cities like Baghdad, Cordoba, Cairo, and Damascus, there were libraries with hundreds of thousands of volumes. Cordoba had streetlights when London did not. Hospitals in the Muslim world had structured wards, medical licensing, and clinical observation. This is not romanticism. This is documented history. But the revolution was deeper than infrastructure. It was conceptual. Islam created a worldview where the universe was orderly, rational, and created by a single God. That matters, because if the universe is rational, then it can be studied. If it operates by laws, those laws can be discovered. Scientific inquiry thrives in a cosmos that makes sense. This theological foundation created intellectual confidence. Studying nature was not rebellion against God. It was a way to understand His creation. Consider mathematics. The very word algebra comes from the Arabic al-Jabr, from the work of al-Khwarizmi. The concept of algorithms, foundational to modern computing, derives from the Latinized form of his name. Think about that the next time you use your smartphone. The numerical system we use today, often called Arabic numerals, was transmitted and developed through Islamic scholarship. Without these intellectual bridges, the Renaissance in Europe would have been delayed, perhaps radically altered. Medicine. Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, wrote the Canon of Medicine, a text that became a standard medical reference in European universities for centuries. That's not a footnote, that's foundational. In philosophy, Ibn Rushd, Averroes, reintroduced Aristotle to Europe. His commentaries influenced thinkers like Thomas Aquinas. The conversation between faith and reason that shaped Western philosophy was in part mediated through Islamic intellectual work. Now pause. This is not about superiority, it's about accuracy. Civilizations rise and fall, contributions overlap, knowledge is cumulative. But to erase this intellectual revolution is not just unfair, it is intellectually dishonest. And dishonesty about history breeds confusion about the present. What made this revolution possible? It wasn't genetics, it wasn't geography alone. It was a value system. Islam placed immense emphasis on justice, law, scholarship, and community responsibility. The ulama, the scholars, held moral authority. Memorization, debate, legal reasoning, these became cultural norms. The mosque was not only a place of prayer, it was a place of learning. The madrasa institutionalized education long before many European universities emerged. And here's something even more radical. Scholars in the Islamic world often disagreed openly.
Schools of law developed with different methodologies: Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali. Theological debates flourished between Asharites, Mutazilites, and others. This was not intellectual stagnation. This was intellectual dynamism. There were tensions, yes. There were political struggles, but there was also rigorous argumentation, preservation of texts, refinement of ideas. So why does this matter now? Because narratives shape identity. And if you grow up hearing that Islam is inherently anti-intellectual, anti-science, anti-progress, you absorb a lie, and lies distort policy, prejudice, and perception. Understanding this intellectual revolution forces you to confront complexity.